This is a Geek Leader. Hey, Geek Leaders, welcome to episode 131 of the podcast, and today's episode is sponsored by Splashtop. If you have not used Splashtop for their remote desktop solutions, you are missing out. I've been using Splashtop Personal for 7 years, and we've been using the enterprise version at my work for about 3 years. And we use these from the enterprise standpoint for remote access for executives when they're traveling, for people that are having issues connecting to the VPN and they're not on site, for any kind of work that we need to do when someone is not here and we can't connect to their machine directly because they're not part of our network. We use Splashtop to securely connect across the internet to wherever they are. Our help desk team can also use Splashtop from their mobile devices, whether it be their Surface, whether it be an iPhone, to connect in and do remote support as well. On a personal level, sometimes I'll sit on my couch with my iPad and remote into my Mac that's in the other room just so I can get some information without having to get up and walk over there and check it out. One time I got a support call and I was at my daughter's gymnastics practice. So she was just practicing and I was able to pull up my phone, log into Splashtop, remote into the server, make some changes, fix an issue, and then close out, all while sitting there without having to pull up a laptop, without having to connect to a VPN, all securely from the privacy of my phone, which was fantastic. Didn't have to miss her gymnastics, didn't have to leave to fix a problem, could do it all right there. Managed service providers can use Splashtop to remotely fix problems when people can call in. They have a product for SOS for issues when things go bad. And the best part about this whole thing is that Splashtop is giving my listeners of A Geek Leader 20% off when you sign up at ageekleader.com/splashtop. So check that out. Sign up. It's awesome. It's a great service. I highly recommend it. Been using them for years and will continue to use them. So again, that's ageekleader.com/splashtop. All right, Geek Leaders. Today on the show, we've got Neil Sahota, and he is an IBM Master Inventor, and he wrote an awesome book called Own the A.I. Revolution, where he talks about artificial intelligence and how that's coming up in the future and how we can, kind of build a strategy to go through that. So, Neil, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, John. Glad to be here.
All right, tell the audience just a little bit about how you got involved in technology and how you stumbled into artificial intelligence and where that's kind of taken you.
I guess the simple answer would be kind of dumb luck, an accident. Growing up, I love playing sports, and that's like all I did. And my mom was always kind of hounding me to, diversify. And she was really gung-ho for me to learn a musical instrument, and I just wasn't interested in that. And I remember we were at like a little strip mall one day walking through, and she was giving me a hard time about it. And she's like, "Need to pick something." And we would walk by this place where they were teaching computer programming. This is back, when Apple IIe's were the rage. And I said, "I want to learn computers." And my mom looked at me. She's like, "You want to learn computers?" I'm like, "Yeah." So she marched me right in and signed me up for classes. And that's how I wound up getting into technology. I actually really enjoyed learning how to program. And, I've been basically started off when I was 8 years old, kept up with it. And then I've always been kind of the guy that was looking for opportunities or, looking at new ways of doing things. And I remember about 12 years ago that business intelligence was, all the rage. People were talking about, oh, look, create these great reports, we have this amazing data and information. And I had several clients telling me that it's amazing what the computer is telling us. And I'm like, the computer's not really telling us anything. We have great tools to collect the data, store it, slice and dice it, and create nice visualizations, but it's not really telling us anything. But could it? And so I wound up developing a series of patents around what I was calling enterprise intelligence. And next thing I know, I got some IBM R&D guys knocking on my door, asking me about some of these things. And next thing I know, I'm working on a project called IBM Watson. And that's how I'm getting started into AI. We had the Jeopardy challenge. Watson did well. And next thing we know, the big question became, what's next? What are you guys going to do? And I was very much an advocate for creating an ecosystem, and there's a lot that can be done. Let's give people the tool sets and help them figure out how to solve problems.
So there's a lot of people who have fear of AI and kind of where it could go. And, you even hear about Elon Musk talking about, we need to regulate this and settle down on it. What are your thoughts, and how does that differ, or is it similar to those fears?
I'm very much for actually regulation, right? It needs to be a balance. We know that too much regulation stifles innovation, but too little regulation or relying on self-governance doesn't work either. Unfortunately, we tend to think about this is what we're going to build, how we're going to build it, and this is how it's going to be used. We don't think about how other people might use it differently or misuse it. And we don't go through that, I guess we'll call it a thought exercise or, philosophical experience and how some of these technological tools actually might be used. And we're now counting on machines to make recommendations, in some cases decisions. We have to be really proactive about what this might mean. I mean, John, you probably heard about the trolley problem with self-driving cars. If it's going to have to hit one or two people, who's it going to hit?
Yeah.
And you can't be reactive on that.
Yeah, that's one of the things. I know we got a Tesla not too long ago, and when you get on autopilot, you kind of I wonder, if there is going to be an accident, how does it know? Does it protect me, who may be a single person driving in the vehicle, or will it try to protect, a family of four who's walking down the street?
Yeah. And how do you make those distinctions? If it's a young woman on one side and a little girl on the other side, who do you hit? And then you're like, well, what if the woman's pregnant? Oh, what if the little girl might grow up to be the person that cures cancer? We could take this down so many different rabbit holes, but the end of the day, we're going to have to make some hard decisions.
Yeah, yeah, and I think in general, these are all just scenarios that people play in their heads, but we know from facts and studies and that self-driving vehicles are safer than humans driving vehicles, right? I think Tesla's last earnings call, they talked about how that the number of miles driven when on autopilot, there's significantly far less accidents than the number of miles driven when not on autopilot.
That's very true, and that's a side of the house we don't talk much about. That it's estimated there's about 20 million people that die or suffer horrific permanent injury worldwide every year. And if I remember correctly, I think the UN estimated that number would get reduced by at least 90% with autonomous vehicles. I mean, you start doing the math and it's like, wow, that's 18 million people a year that would be spared that suffering or death.
Yeah, that's amazing. But then you come into like, well, what about those, 2 million accidents that will happen? Who's responsible for that? Is it the software developers? Is it the car manufacturers? Is it the driver who should have been paying attention that wasn't?
Oh, these are the things we have to figure out. These are not easy conversations. They're not quick conversations, but they're conversations we need to have. And I think in trying to form regulation or policy or even legislation, it can't just be the regulators, the legislators. It's got to be people from all points in this, the people that are designing the software, the people that are designing the autonomous vehicle, the AI, the people in insurance, the auto manufacturers. I think all of them need to come to the table and kind of hash through this. It's the only way we're going to be successful.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. To have everybody sitting at the table talking about it and having open conversations about it, which some people don't want to do.
Yep.
So part of your role now is you're an advisor at the UN. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah,
Very proud of that.
Yeah. So how did that come to be? Because that seems like that's a amazing honor, for starters, to be asked to be an advisor at the UN. But how did something like that happen?
Good friends. I'll put it that way. There's a very good friend of mine, Stephen Ibaraki, who actually wrote the foreword for my book. And I just helped him out with Financial Services Roundtable, and he called me up, just asking me how it went. And then he's like, "Hey, Neil, the UN does this conference once every 4 years. It's a super big deal. You get, all the world leaders, the ambassadors, all those people there. And I sit on the organizing committee, and I put your name forward for a keynote." And I just laughed. I'm like, "Yeah, huh? Totally yanking my chain." He's like, no. He's like, "I didn't even have to sell you." he's like, a couple of UN guys had heard you talk before, so do you want to do it? And I wound up going to that conference and giving the keynote, and I was warned in advance that a lot of folks are going to say this is Terminator time. That's what AI is. It's going to take over the world, eradicate humanity. And so I gave a talk about how we could actually use the technology towards the sustainable development goals, how we can use this to augment public services. And afterwards, several of the UN leaders came up to me and basically said, you really opened our eyes to possibilities. And we want to pursue this more and explore what we could do here. And, after a few meetings, we decided to actually start what we call now AI for Good, an initiative where we're using AI to try and make the Sustainable Development Goals a reality. And I've been helping them spool up projects around that. And in the last 3 years, we've generated 116 projects. But more importantly, the partnerships that we managed to develop, because the UN is used to doing things kind of on their own or within their own agencies. And this has really kind of opened their eyes to the value of collaboration, where they're actually working with industry, they're working with academia, other nonprofits, other government agencies to really try and make these things a reality. And the Secretary General has even said that this is a powerful thing for us, and that we can really, move the needle. We can really make some of these things a reality because of those partnerships.
So what's one of those projects that you guys have spun up that's kind of like the most far out there, that's just like one of the ones that could have maybe one of the biggest impacts, but also maybe one of the more challenging ones to achieve?
Well, one of the big challenges is, like, in Africa, there's about one doctor for every 2,000 people. And a lot of people live far away from a doctor or like a clinic or a hospital. And so if something happens, it's really hard to get access to healthcare. And so one of the things that we've developed and continue to improve is having a self-contained tablet with an AI on it that has some basic medical knowledge. And so, with the proliferation of mobile devices, villagers know how to use the tablet. And so if someone falls really ill or someone suffers a really major injury, a villager could use this tablet. The AI can help prompt questions. It can look at the video camera and help the villager see, okay, how can you help treat this person? And if it's really severe, then let's notify a hospital, get a helicopter or something out there to get this person to, a better medical care facility. But it's really empowering villagers to be able to give, basic healthcare services.
Wow. So we all always think about, like, when I hear AI, it replacing some of the routine, less skilled jobs per se. But you're talking about taking AI to, help out where there's a shortage of, highly trained and highly skilled professions.
Yeah, and I know for a lot of people we think about computers as automation, but I think with AI, it brings a lot of new capabilities. I mean, a lot of people call it the third generation computing. And we can create more powerful tools. We've seen that the machine can do some kind of like low level admin type of tasks that might require some cognition, but that's a powerful tool set for us, right? It's the goal is not to replace us as people, but to free up our time to tackle more complex, more value added work.
Yeah, I think that's the absolute thing that people get confused about. They always think about AI taking jobs, and whereas it's really going to free us up to be more creative, to do things that, to have more time for experiences. I know that's one of the things that I always try to use automation to save my time so that I can spend more time with my family, so I can spend more time with my kids, so I can focus on something that's more strategic and has more value in the long run than, copying or pasting things.
Yep, very true.
So, with that, what's the outcome of something like that? Is it something that's getting close? Is it something that you guys are still focusing on, or still trying to figure out how to? What's the distribution channels going to be like? What's the how much funds need to be raised for something like that?
This was I call it the basics of being able to do it are in place, and just from, I'll call it an AI tech standpoint, there's been some distribution. It's more on exactly the funding. How do we get this out to people? Where is it needed the most? How many tablets could we get? And then there are some infrastructure issues, right? because it's self-contained, it doesn't require like an internet connection, but it still needs to be charged.
Mm.
And we know that some of these rural areas in Africa that getting access to electricity or a stable, source of electricity can be a challenge.
Yeah, yeah. So you'd have to come up with something like a solar charging station or something like that that would go
Yeah.
along with it.
Yep.
Huh, interesting. Man, it seems like such cool stuff to work on and think about. Um, so, one of the things you talked about in your book was that some people are afraid of new things, and AI is one of those new things that people are afraid of. What are some examples in the past that you may have studied or heard about where something new came to the forefront and people were afraid of it, but then it all worked out well today? Now we look back on that and think that was silly for us to be afraid of something like that. Do you think that will happen also with AI in the future?
I think so. I'm kind of chuckling to myself because one of the examples I used in the book was the printing press. And, when the printing press basically first came out, people thought it would destroy society. It would actually be the end of humanity. It would be it would be I can't even think of the right word. It would totally mess up, mar, destroy knowledge, right? And we look back and said, wow, I can't believe they thought that. That was so silly because it actually enabled the mass of people to get access to knowledge, to information. It was a huge game changer for society. It was quite the opposite effect, but people at the time thought that. Very much like the tractor. When the tractor was first invented, people thought that would be the end of farmers. And it's like we look back, it's like it was just a tool that let farmers do more work. And I think that's what we're going to find with AI. Ultimately, it's just a tool that lets us do more important work.
Hmm. No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think back when I was younger and we were first, getting these disc in the mail about join Prodigy and connect to the internet. And mom was like, "Oh, that internet's of the devil. You want to stay away from that internet. It's evil." And now it's she's connecting on Facebook to look at pictures of the kids. So it's just like it goes full circle. I think about it on a macro level, and also like the tractor example that you mentioned of it's going to replace farmers. No, it's just going to let us grow more crops faster so we can feed more people as the population's growing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like to tell people, you look 100 years ago, we spent like I think 80% of our time and resources trying to acquire food. Today is about 7%. And it's like, what we did with that time is we've revolutionized the way we manufacture products. We've developed vehicles, aircraft. But a lot of people ask me like, why does it seem like these changes and innovations are coming faster and faster? I think it's because we're freeing up more time to tackle all these problems, to think differently, to be innovators or disruptors.
So when we get and what's the difference between, in your mind, between like machine learning and AI? Are they kind of one and the same? Because I hear the terms kind of tossed out and bounced back and forth. And not being an AI expert, I've always thought of like what we have today as being machine learning, and then like the sentient being in the future being AI. But I don't know if that's mistaken or how should I frame this?
That's a good question because AI is definitely a moving target when it comes to a definition. It's constantly evolving. Machine learning is really a subset of AI. When it comes, machine learning is really that you're not really programming the machine. You're feeding it lots and lots of data, and you're giving it what we call ground truth, basically rules on how to make decisions. And that's basically how the machine actually learns. So it ingests all this data. You ask it to try something. It tries something. You correct it and say that might be right, might be wrong. You should have thought this, or but it learns that way. And that's just one piece of AI. Because when it comes to AI, there's other pieces like the ability to understand natural language, which is really tough for a machine because we don't speak. We speak with a lot of idiom, slang, jargon. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if I tell you, John, that I'm feeling blue because it's raining cats and dogs, you totally get what I say, right? But
Yeah,
you tell
absolutely.
it to a machine, what does the machine think, right? That Neil is physically the color blue because small animals are falling from the sky. I mean, that doesn't compute. But AI doesn't look at like the keywords. It's not looking at literal, definitions. It's trying to draw context and meaning from the conversation. So it was going to get that Neil's really sad because it's raining pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
that's something that's, independent of machine learning. That they can be combined together, but that's why machine learning is basically a subset of AI.
Okay. Yeah. So, how much is happening right now? You mentioned the exponential growth of innovation that we see today, and how far away are we from some of these big, massive changes like full self-driving vehicles, or I was talking to the CIO at NYU Langdon about their medical facility. He talked about how there's so many, it's like 20% of all their patients are seen virtually today. When is that going to be replaced with AI versus the doctor, and free up the doctor to do more important things with surgeries and some of the smaller, I don't want to say insignificant, but less significant problems can be handled. So the more focused things can be handled by the professionals. Where are we on with that, and how is this accelerated change, moving that along?
Well, I'll give you the typical MBA answer in that it depends. It depends on what area we're talking about. Like self-driving cars, we're not that far away, and that seems to surprise people. Singapore has actually had self-driving buses and taxis for almost 2 years now. I actually, a couple of months ago, I was in China and I saw the head of Mazda as well as the Minister of like Transportation in China, and they were talking about how they're probably going to achieve level 4 automation in self-driving vehicles early next year. And China has one of the most complex set of rules when it comes to the roads and driving, as well as a lot of variability out there. And when they hit that level 4, they're very seriously talking about making those cars legal on the streets and highways in China. In fact, I know the California legislature is talking about a bill right now, which they'll probably pass early next year to make self-driving vehicles legal on California highways. Where I teach part-time at UC Irvine, they've actually just launched a service for like the students and the faculty and the staff called Bot Ride, where it's an autonomous vehicle. You can actually call through the app a ride. It's restricted to certain areas, but you can actually hop into a totally self-driving car and it'll take you somewhere. And I know Ford is going to release a car in 2021, no steering wheel, no brake, no accelerator.
Oh, wow.
So on that front, I think it's going to be much sooner than later. I think you're going to see self-driving cars become more and more the norm in probably 5, 6 years. You flip that around to like the healthcare side, um, that I think is just going to take longer, and that's more a people concern than a technology concern. I think people are going to have to feel like they can trust the technology before they're willing to accept and adopt it. I think it's not necessarily that we can't do it or we can't do it within the next couple of years. We can. We've seen a lot of progress. I think it's are people willing to put their faith in it? Is there enough trust in it that they're going to actually use it? That doctors are going to be okay, or nurses are going to be okay if some of that work is offloaded to a machine.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I've seen this a lot recently, that it seems like the legislation is falling behind the technology. They're not able to keep up with the changes. And even when you saw like the privacy issues with certain social media companies, they're talking about it, the Congress didn't really seem to know what to ask to get the right questions. And I feel like with automation and AI and self-driving vehicles, that there's going to be a lot of things that the legislation is going to just fall behind.
Yeah, and the truth is, it probably already has. And I know, like at least in the United States, a lot of the states are trying to figure out how to make up that difference and try and figure out how they can at least put some policies in place. But it's tough for them, right? I mean, the policymakers, the regulators, they don't have a good understanding of the technology, and they don't, or they can't fathom, it's probably a better word, how this stuff might be used or misused.
Yeah.
And they're not used to, again, sitting down with, technologists or industry or, academia to kind of talk through the possibilities so they can jump ahead of it. So it's a mindset shift for a lot of folks to try and do this.
Yeah, I just think about all the amazing things that will happen once. I was talking to my son. He's 5. He said something about, when are you going to teach me how to drive your truck? And I was like, well, Maybe never, because you may not have to drive a car. It may just drive for you by the time you're old enough to drive it. Um, and you look at that when I think, I had a friend in high school got hit by a drunk driver and got killed, and it's like, well, that may not ever happen again because we'll have vehicles where people won't drive drunk; they'll just get in the car and the car will drive them.
Yeah. Well, we heard that story about that guy that when he was so drunk he passed out, but his Tesla was on autopilot.
Yeah, it's just, and I'm sure that saved somebody's life somewhere because otherwise, he definitely would have crashed.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just, there's so much upside I think to this technology and AI in general that the downside seems very. Well, what is the downside? What are people saying about the potential negatives of some of this stuff?
Well, it might surprise you. I mean, people are always worried about machines and all that taking over, but there's real concerns. I think there are very legitimate concerns about access to some of these things. Right. One of the things that I'm a firm believer is I see a move towards human and machine integration. We've seen things now where it's still experimental, but they've done several surgeries where they're able to put digital cameras into a blind person's eyes and transmit the signal into the brain. Right. So you're essentially giving them the ability to see again or see for the first time. We're seeing things like people that have lost a limb. They're trying to use AI to map out brain waves to understand the movement of tendons and muscles to see what that means so you can control an artificial limb. And these are really powerful, game-changing things. But the downside is this going to be is this only going to be for a select few of people that can afford it, right? So we know we can do big things. We know can do things that will help people, but who's going to actually be able to use it? And that's kind of the downside on that, because right now a lot of people are focused on ROI and commercialization, and there's nothing wrong with that. But are we going to create a disparate impact around that? And then on the flip side, you think about the future of work. We're already seeing that people that don't have some kind of basic rudimentary STEM skills are falling behind. They're not don't have the right knowledge or skills to kind of get the jobs that are in need, and that's driving the income inequality, that wedge even bigger. So these are kind of the downsides to what's happening right now.
And how can we, as tech leaders or people out there, sort of try to mitigate this for the future?
I think it really is a mindset that we have to start thinking about these issues obviously up front, but I'm a very big proponent about social enterprise, social entrepreneurship. I'm not saying don't make money, don't do these things, but while you're doing that, is there some sort of benefit or something you can give, or is there a way that people that may not be able to afford or do some of these things be able to do that? I have a former protege, very passionate about, social good. He started a nonprofit, and one of the things he really wanted to do was he created something called AppJam Plus to teach kids in underserved schools just basic programming, right? Like a little 6-week fun thing. And he's trying to fundraise. And what he found was the schools that were in more affluent areas, they wanted that program. They were willing to pay for that program. It was much tougher to get into the underserved schools where they're offering it for free. Because, it's just like, okay, well, where do the devices come from? Where do we do this? And I remember we were sitting down talking about it one day, and he was frustrated. And I'm like, well, why don't you do this? Why not take the money from those schools, but you charge them, enough where it pays for the cost of teaching that school as well as teaching an underserved school at the same time, right? So they're really paying for two schools, two sets of student groups to get that training.
So that way, for every affluent school, you're paying for one of the underserved schools.
That's right. And that's actually what they're doing. That worked out really well. It's really allowed them to scale up, and it's been very effective. It's the same thing where there's a fintech company called Mosabi, where, through their own experiences, they learned that microloans make a huge difference in some of these small rural communities. That, even getting like $200-300 loan to improve a little store, stuff like that, pays huge dividends for the local economy. It usually creates a couple of jobs, helps spread some money around. People, quality of life goes up. But one of the things that they realized was, even by creating a platform to help those guys get those loans, because the manual process was taking 6, 7 months, a lot of people just didn't realize, did they even have an opportunity? Could they even use a microloan? And so what they wound up doing was creating very localized financial literacy programs that they just gave away. So the thing that came for them was, okay, now we're helping provide the service people need, but at the same time, we're actually kind of improving, building their knowledge about financial literacy, about saving, about these types of things. That's just available to the general community. So they're making some money and they're doing social good at the same time.
I think that seems to work out better for businesses anyway, right? If you are doing social good, then people want to use your services because they feel good about it. I mean, I think back to when Tom's kind of hit the scene of buy a pair of shoes, we'll give a pair of shoes, and that kind of thing made me want to go buy those shoes because I knew someone else would be benefiting from that.
I 100% agree with you, and I think the younger generation, especially Generation Z, they're very tuned into that. I think they're very much more motivated not to just buy those products and services, but they want to work for companies that are doing social enterprise, that there are social entrepreneurs. That yeah, we're making money, but we're trying to help out the planet, help out people as well.
So when you talk about what is your take on people that are companies and businesses that try to allow employees, because I always try to get my employees to do something on the side, do something different, because I feel like if I allow them the freedom to maybe start their own business, to start a nonprofit on the side, do something, they're going to take some of that knowledge that they gain doing this other thing and bring it into work, which would be beneficial for us, but also it'll give them something to strive for. But yeah, I've pitched this idea and talked about it with other people, and they're like, no, I don't want my employees, doing anything else but just focusing on their work. Well, have you ever ran into something like that when you mentioned talking about, entrepreneurship for the social good? Do you ever see businesses that kind of fall in one of those two camps, or what is your thought on that?
Unfortunately, I have seen that, John. I get their mindset that they're worried that if you kind of open that door, that it's going to take away time from work. They're like, look, I want my guys to work 40, 44 hours, be productive, create value for my company. And I know there's a general mindset that says, well, if they spend even 1 hour helping out a nonprofit, that's 1 hour they're taking away from me, right? And I don't think it's a zero-sum game like that. I and I've encouraged people that this is good for morale. This is it helps diversify people. It actually helps them make more committed to your organization. But it's a tough ethereal thing. I mean, I was lucky enough that I worked for IBM. They were very encouraging of social service, social good. They had a whole community internally. They encouraged people to volunteer hours. You get up to 40 hours a year to work on like projects for nonprofits. You could put things forward. I mean, I used to work for a manager where he was really into what is it? Was it where you build the homes? I can't think of it now.
Habitat for Humanity. Yeah.
Yeah, Habitat for Humanity. And I remember like twice a year, he'd always put something on the community where he wants to get a bunch of IBMers to go out and try and build a home or two, over a couple of weekends. And he would get like 200, 300 people to come out every time. And it was a good way just to bond outside of work, all these types of things that IBM actually saw. I mean, they were tracking this, that the employees that were doing these types of things were just generally happier. They were more productive. They actually were more innovative. They had that kind of different perspective on things that brought new insights, new ideas in. And I know that's a really tough thing for companies to see. I know intuitively we get that, but it's hard to break that model of, man, if I even let that guy go for 2 hours, I'm losing those 2 hours. And I don't think that's the right way. I think you have to say, look, what you're doing is you're investing those 2 hours, right? You're going to get paid back on those 2 hours. in terms of either better productivity, better morale, new ideas, but it's not a loss, it's an investment.
Yeah, yeah, I agree 100%. I know I told the story a few years ago when I gave my TEDx talk, but when I first became a manager of web and mobile developers, I was terrible at it. I mean, I really sucked at it, and I had the highest turnover rate in our entire technology department, and for a couple of years, and then just somebody mentioned something about, well, one of the things you need to do is find something that your team can do outside of work that gives them more purpose about their jobs. So I set up a volunteer. We started doing it once a quarter, and then we eventually moved it to monthly, and that was by the choice of the team, not by me. But we would spend a lunch either going to a soup kitchen and serving food, or we would spend a couple hours in the morning on a Friday and go to a children's detention home and pressure wash their toys and their equipment, or we would go to a nursing home and read books and play games with some of the elderly. And we started doing that once a quarter, and then I wasn't sure if it was making a difference. I just knew I was getting my people out of work for a couple hours, but projects seemed to still be getting done, but I wasn't exactly sure of the impact. But then I started noticing that I wasn't having people quit. The turnover rate was kind of going away. And then one month or one quarter, I kind of just forgot to do it. And then one person said, "Hey, I know we haven't done this quarter yet. Can I set it up?" And I said, "Sure." And then all of a sudden, people started setting them up, and someone else would come to me and say, "Hey, I found out about this charity going over here," and we did that. And we actually did a habitat build where we took the entire week off, and I didn't make anybody take PTO or anything, and we just worked on that. And you would have thought we didn't get any projects done, and I was ready to go to the business and say, "Hey, we're late on all these projects." But what I found out after the fact is that my team would work at the habitat build, and they would go home and they would open up their laptops to catch up to make sure that they kept things going without even telling me about it.
Well, there you go. I mean, that's awesome. That's a powerful testimonial right there. I really love it. I think, I definitely advocate to all those leaders out there that, give your employees a chance to do some work like this. It's going to pay dividends for you.
Yeah, because people enjoy. I mean, they want to feel like what they're doing, is helpful. And sometimes when you're working in tech, you don't see that immediately because you're working for a business making an app, or you don't see the actual positive impact that you are creating. So if you can't get close to that, you got to find another way as a leader to do that.
Yep, 100%.
So I wanted to ask you about a couple of nonprofits that you've been working with. Your bio said that you were helping out the Zero Abuse Project. Can you tell me a little bit about that and kind of how you guys are helping out there?
Yeah, so the Zero Abuse Project is focused on helping survivors of childhood sexual abuse, and also trying to figure out ways to try and prevent it, and help identify some of the institutions that protect the bad actors. And it's heartbreaking what's going on. It's just the best way to put it. I mean, the stories they're horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
And they heard me give a talk, and they approached me and we were just chatting. And they're like, "Do you think AI can help us do something?" And I'm like, "Probably, right? It depends on what you want to try and do, and do you have the data for it." And one of the things that we learned is that there are certain indicators or red flags that show that a child might be at risk for being abused, or there might be a organization or institution that there might be some indicators that they're covering something up. And so I've actually been working with them to use AI to not just automate some of those processes, but to uncover some of what those indicators, red flags actually are. So I can tell you that right now they're in beta testing on it. It's looking good, and they've already discovered a couple of, I'll just say, interesting indicators. I probably can't share what they are, that they actually never realized before. It's one of those little subtleties in all the patterns of data. And so they're really stoked, because for them it's all about protecting the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And if this helps them protect the kids, it's huge. It's just huge for them.
Yeah, you definitely want to try to get ahead of that, because it's, once the damage is done, it's, you can't really undo it, So finding indicators that will help you, stop something before it happens is, oh man, that's game changer.
Yeah.
And also Planet Home. What is Planet Home?
So Planet Home it's a nonprofit that's really trying to do a couple of things. So they're want to save the planet. That's probably the easiest way to put it. And they've kind of broken it down into four areas: eat, make, move, live. So they're trying to tie it to the things that we do in our lives. And what they want to do is help people, one, be more aware of what's going on and what the opportunities to help are. But two, they're really motivated to try and also help the youth culture see what they can do, right? We know about the big problems. We know about climate change, for example, right?
Hmm.
And people want to do things, but a lot of people just feel like they can't move the needle, right? There's nothing I'm going to be able to do as an individual that's really going to affect climate change. And that's not really a good mindset to be in. And so one of the things they're trying to do is show people that small changes add up. That if you do something as simple as, you know what, I'm going to give up plastic straws, it seems inconsequential, but you're really joining, worldwide a group of, 50 million people that are giving up straws. And as a whole, that's moving the needle, right? So they're trying to encourage people to find these small things to do, as well as if you want to do more, you want to get more active and involved, they've got projects in various areas. So if you're interested in, ocean health, there's some people out there doing things where you can get matched together and just say, hey, I want to help these guys out. And so there's an opportunity to turn their interest or desire to do something into actual action.
Yeah, that sounds really good. I definitely, I'm one for saving the planet, and I think that we've done so many things wrong for so long, and now we know about it. And a big part of it is we just didn't know. Kind of like I look back, my dad, smoked until he learned that it wasn't healthy. It's kind of like we've done the same thing. We've made so many changes and so many things to our environment because we didn't know better, but now we do know. Now we do know that climate change is real. At least most of us know. And there's still some deniers out there, but it's really great to see that there's things that we can do. And how is AI kind of benefiting them?
Well, one of the things that they do is they do these things called eco sprints. And so they bring, people together and they kind of do like an idea jam and brainstorm. But they also look at things like emerging technology like AI or VR and all these things and say, could we use some of these tools as accelerators to create a solution? Right? At the end of the day, Planet Home wants to build solutions. They want people to be solutionists. So rather than just complain about the problem, we're doing something. And so lots of ideas get generated, lots of feasible things are generated. Some of them are actually pursued as solutions. And so AI is involved in some of those solutions. Other technologies are involved in some of those solutions. So they're looking to try and, it's very similar to the UN, bridge some of the gap out there by using technology as a tool.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate your time. Can you tell the folks how they can connect with you and find out more about you and where to pick up your book?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. Thanks, John. People can find me on my website, neilsahota.com. Feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. I post very actively, share information, articles, and opportunities that people might be interested. Or you can follow me on Twitter. My handle is at Neil_Sahota. And my book is available at all major retailers like Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and all that. So if you pick up a copy, do drop me a line. Let me know what you think.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm going to link all those up in the show notes. The book will also be on geekleader.com, books from our listeners, so you guys can go there and check it out, and definitely check it out. Thanks so much for coming on the show, and I really appreciate it, man.
Hey, John, thanks for having me. This was awesome.
Again, I want to thank SplashTop for sponsoring this episode of A Geek Leader Podcast. And you can find out more at geekleader.com/splashtop to receive 20% off of your services. SplashTop, again, is the premier solution provider for remote access, remote desktop support, screen mirroring, and lots of other really cool services that you can use. And I've been using them for years. We'll continue to use them. And I'm very grateful that they sponsored today's episode. So please visit geekleader.com/splashtop to learn more and to get your 20% off. Thanks so much.